Okay, we should be good to go.
Okay. Hi, my name is Mirella Lopez, and I am an Alfred Fleishman Diversity Fellow at FleishmanHillard. And I'm here to talk about professional development. And professional development is how you present yourself as a professional out in the world. And I'm also going to be going over interview tips, resume tips, and hopefully this helps you guys out. So let's get the job done. Resume building, it's tricky. You're going to hear a lot of advice from many different people, but I've been to a lot of resume workshops, and this is a surefire way of writing your resume. I guarantee it. So one of the first things is that I see a big mistake is people make more than one page for their resume. Your resume should be one page. Even if you have a lot to say, it's really just for the recruiters to look at, and it takes 6 seconds to look at your resume. That's how long that they are looking at your resume for. It should be 11 point or 12 point font, and if you don't have enough space for that, then consider cutting things out. Use words that are action-oriented and hard skills. So if you know how to use Microsoft, put that in there. If you know how to use Excel, put that in there. Those are hard skills that you actually have. If you are good at managing, if you have leadership skills, again, hard skills. Use action words like that you managed and that you were preparing. Those are action-oriented words, things that you actually did. And one of the best tips, something that not a lot of people will tell you, but quantify anything that you can. That means use numbers. So if there is something that you were a leader of and you were a manager of, you can say, I leaded a team of 10 people. Any way that you can get numbers. If you were in charge of a cash register and at the end of the night you had $6,000 or more in your cash register, you can say, I was responsible for $6,000 at the end of the night. Any kind of thing that you can put numbers to, do it. If you don't have relevant experience on your resume, make sure that you go out and volunteer those skills. So if you are going into education and you don't have any skills in the education field, I'm sure there are ways to volunteer in the education field, and you can put that on your resume so that you have more relevant skills. And the more relevant your skills are to the actual job, the better it is for you. So we have here an example of a resume. So make sure you put your first and your last name at the top, the title of your job posting, your cell phone number, your email. You do not need to put, you're going to see templates where it has the address. You do not need to put the address that is outdated. Also, then you put your professional history next. You don't put your educational history first. I know you're going to want to because you're a college student and that's really valuable to you, but it's not valuable to the people who are looking at their resume. They want to see, again, that relevant experience. So put that first. You just need to put the date that you started working there and the date that it ended. And then again, organized, received, handled. All of those are action-oriented words. And you can see that the skills are there for a dental assistant. And then at the bottom, you can put your skills set that I was saying, hard skills as well. X-ray certified, dental impressions, having all of those relevant skills on there is important. All right, it's time for your interview, and you need to know how to dress to impress. So here I have a visual example of what business formal is, and that's how you should be going into your interview. Typically, we're going to see a collared shirt, we're going to see suit, slacks or pants, you're going to see high heels for women, polished leather dress shoes for men, you're going to see a suit for men, again with the tie and an overcoat. If those are not accessible to you, if wearing dress pants is not accessible to you, you can always opt for a dress. You can always opt for more comfortable shoes, as long as you're really monochromatic, meaning your clothes, are, if you're not wearing slacks, you're wearing another type of pants, as long as they're black or some kind of neutral color, you should be able to pass it off. There are some professional looking clothes that are more accessible than the suit. Look up common interview questions and then practice your answers. There are so many common interview questions you're going to hear over and over and over again. Just one example is, tell me a little bit about yourself. And how you should be answering, tell me a little bit about yourself, is you should be saying, it's like an elevator pitch, which Tyra went over in the last session. These are my skills. These are the places that I've worked. So again, look up common interview questions and then practice those answers. If you don't know how to answer an interview question, then you answer that question by giving a story. So if someone asks you, tell me a time when you were faced with a difficult obstacle, tell them a story. You don't have to be so cutthroat about it. Just tell them an example that comes to mind. And those are great examples. Those are great ways to answering questions you don't know the answer to. Always ask questions after the interview. This is something I got critiqued on from FleishmanHillard, so I'm passing on the knowledge to you. Basically, they want you to ask questions when they say at the end, do you have any questions? They want you to have a list of questions prepared because it shows that you're interested in the company. So that's my extra little tidbit to you. Requesting accommodations. Disclosing your disability is based on you and your needs. It is not required by law. You do not have to say anything if you don't want to say anything, but if you need accommodations, speak up. Contact Access U for help with learning what your accommodations are and getting them figured out so that you know how to best work with your company and basically create a list of answers to questions. There are going to be questions regarding your disability and if you're able to complete a task because of your disability. So make sure you have a list of answers to questions you might feel are going to come up. If you aren't sure, there are always a list of duties on the job application. They're going to ask maybe you to lift 5 pounds on the, must be able to lift 5 pounds. So if you know that that's on the list of duties, but you're unable to lift that certain amount of weight, then be prepared to answer that question. How are you going to work with them to make sure that you have some sort of accommodation to overcome that obstacle of, oh, hey, I need something to lift. Maybe there's somebody who is designated to help you lift something, and just, create solutions. So let's talk about an activity. So what are some common interview questions that you might be asked? You can unmute yourselves or type it in the chat of what are common questions, and we will go over them. So I'll give you a minute to think about that. And then here are companies to look at who are on the Valuable 500 list, which are companies that have dedicated themselves and stated that they are going to be inclusive to people with disabilities. Adobe, like the Adobe Creative Cloud Suite, they also have Photoshop and Premiere. If you're a creative, Adobe is a good place. Airbnb, they've committed to being more accessible to people with disabilities and hiring people with disabilities and make that commitment. So Airbnb, the American Heart Association, Apple, Anthem, Boeing, they have the airplanes, Comcast, TV, Capital One Banking, Dell, Ernest Young, FleishmanHillard, Google, H&M if you're more into fashion, Hilton if you're looking for something in the what's it called? Hospitality industry, Intel, Logitech, MasterCard, Salesforce, the Walt Disney Company, Walgreens, and there's so many more on that list. It's a list of 500 companies. So you can look up the valuable 500 for a list of companies to apply to. And with that, let's start our activity. Practice, practice, practice.
I'll pose the question again. So what can students do to handle interview nerves?
A way to handle interview nerves is, again, to practice, practice, practice. If you feel more prepared than when you have an unexpected moment, you at least will have been prepared for other questions and you'll be able to think on your feet. If you do your research on a company and you know everything about that company inside and out, and you have practiced your interview questions, it really helps with the nerves, because even though you're still going to be nervous, you're going to feel prepared to answer those questions. And I think that's really important, is to just know the best way to answer a question, and you're researched and you feel like, okay, if they throw anything at me out of the blue, at least I know everything about them and I know how to answer certain questions, and just maneuver your way through.
Another question we got: in an interview, how do you ask about pay?
Yes, that is a question that, is really hard to bring up. A good way to bring up pay, in my experience, is to ask what their range is, and never give a direct number. You always want to ask, what is the pay range for this position? What were you budgeting for this position? Those are ways to phrase that question. You never want to say, I am looking for a pay of this number. And if they ask you what you're looking for, just give a range. You can say, after my research on this role and this position, I believe that the pay range for me would be, 35 to 40,000 a year. Or, if you're hourly, you could say, $13 to $14 an hour. And you always want to give a range, because you never know what they're planning. And if you say the wrong number, that does hinder you, unfortunately. So you always just want to give a range, do your research on what the position is paying, and kind of give a basis off of that.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Hi, I had one that I dropped in the chat earlier. But the tell me about yourself question, I think it'd be great if you could kind of clarify, what does that all entail? What are the most important things to kind of hit home on that question, and, how to really kind of put yourself out there and effectively do that when somebody asks you this question.
Okay. Yes. Did I accidentally stop sharing my screen? Sorry. Okay. Is that back? The tell me about yourself question. Yes. So the biggest things to hit are exactly like how Tyra presented the elevator pitch. You want to make sure you hit who you are, what you're currently doing, and skills that you can bring to the position. And so that's the biggest thing. So hi, my name is Mirella, and I am an Alfred Fleishman Diversity Fellow right now. And skills that I can bring to this position are that I am very creative. I have skills in Photoshop and Illustrator, and I am also a great writer. I'm an award-winning journalist, and I would name, a few other skills. And that is just the best way to present yourself. Is you want to look at the job requirements and you want to match the skills that you have to the job requirements, and just, you know, state how you how you're going to fit into that role. Is how I usually answer that question, and it's worked for me. So hopefully that helps answer Popeye.
Absolutely. Love that.
Any other questions? Okay, Mirella, I think we're probably ready to wrap up. I want to thank you so much for presenting this to our students. We've obviously recorded it, so we're going to make it available on YouTube for them to access at any time. But I just want to take a moment to thank you for putting this together and for covering this content. It really means a lot, and it's really helpful to our students who are actively looking for